The mind has a hidden prison. Its walls are invisible, its chains are intangible, and its keys have been discarded long before awareness dawns. Yet, most people wander through life as if they are free, unaware that their thoughts, fears, and desires have been shaped not by their own hands, but by the expectations, judgments, and manipulations of others. This is the psychology of the slave mind. It is subtle, insidious, and pervasive. It thrives in quiet obedience, in unquestioned conformity, in the unchallenged acceptance of limitations imposed externally and internalized deeply. Nietzsche called this the condition of the herd, the human tendency to trade autonomy for comfort, courage for security, and self-expression for approval. To confront this truth is unsettling, because the chains we carry are often the ones we forged ourselves, polished daily with habits, fears, and rationalizations. The first step toward liberation is recognizing the extent of the captivity. Most recoil at this realization, for the mind that has been enslaved convinces itself that limitation is safety, that obedience is morality, that dependence is protection. The psychology of the slave mind is not imposed entirely from the outside. It is constructed by every fear, every compromise, every quiet surrender we make to authority, to tradition, and to our own uncertainty. Consider the young man who spends years seeking validation. Every achievement is measured not by personal fulfillment, but by how others will perceive it. Every ambition is filtered through the lens of what is acceptable, safe, or likely to be praised. He believes himself free, yet his decisions are constrained by internalized rules, by the fear of disapproval, by a persistent, almost unconscious need for approval. The moment he departs from what is expected, anxiety surges. Risk becomes unbearable. Creativity is stifled. He has trained his mind to obey, not to command, to follow, not to initiate. The chains are invisible because they are self-imposed, yet they are no less real. Nietzsche observed that such minds, even when successful by external standards, remain in a state of quiet servitude, bound to the dictates of perception and expectation rather than the imperatives of authentic selfhood. The slave mind thrives on fear. Fear of failure, fear of ridicule, fear of rejection, and fear of isolation create invisible barriers that prevent autonomy. Take the woman who has been conditioned to seek approval through kindness and compliance. Every decision is tempered by the potential reactions of others. She avoids confrontation even when her needs are neglected, silences her desires even when opportunities arise, and internalizes blame when outcomes do not align with expectations. Her world is structured to avoid conflict and discomfort, yet in this avoidance, she sacrifices agency. Fear has transformed freedom into liability. She believes she is protected, yet protection has come at the cost of autonomy, creativity, and self-trust. Nietzsche's insight is clear: the strongest chains are not forged in iron, but in fear. Those who cannot confront the reality of their dependence remain prisoners, mistaking acquiescence for morality and comfort for power. Manipulation plays a profound role in sustaining the slave mind. Human beings are highly suggestible. Authority, tradition, social norms, and even subtle interpersonal dynamics shape thought without conscious recognition. A manager in a corporate environment subtly enforces compliance by rewarding obedience and punishing initiative. A peer group reinforces conformity through subtle exclusion or ridicule. Family systems transmit expectations as moral imperatives, embedding obedience in identity itself. Those subject to these pressures learn to internalize control, creating a mental environment where external domination becomes internalized regulation. The result is a form of psychological slavery. The individual polices themselves, punishes themselves, and adapts their desires to the demands of others rather than the dictates of their own conscience. Nietzsche's secret insight is that mastery begins not with defeating external oppressors, but with reclaiming internal sovereignty. The first revolution occurs within. Consider the impact of self-sabotage in the slave mind. A talented musician avoids performing publicly because of imagined judgment. A writer hesitates to publish their work, paralyzed by potential criticism. A professional avoids speaking up in meetings, believing their voice is irrelevant. Each act of avoidance reinforces dependence, instills doubt, and strengthens the internalized chains of fear and conformity. Every day, these choices accumulate, creating a life constrained by avoidance, by what is safe, by what is expected. The mind becomes a cage, and the key is forgotten. The tragic irony is that the individual often rationalizes these limitations as prudence, responsibility, or morality. Nietzsche understood this deception is not only external, the self is complicit, and often the most effective oppressor. Existential struggle is central to the psychology of the slave mind. To live authentically, to act independently, is to confront the void, the absence of guarantees, the absence of external validation, and the weight of absolute responsibility for one's life. Most retreat from this confrontation, embracing distraction, routine, or adherence to collective expectation. Freedom requires acceptance of uncertainty and responsibility, yet the enslaved mind prefers the illusion of guidance to the burden of self-determination. The existential tension creates profound discomfort, which the mind avoids at all costs. Nietzsche's philosophy is unflinching. Avoidance preserves comfort, but it erodes spirit, agency, and potential. The first motivation toward liberation is awareness that avoidance is not safety, it is spiritual erosion. Yet, liberation is possible. The first step is recognition, acknowledging the fears, influences, and self-imposed limitations that govern thought and behavior. Awareness alone is insufficient. Courage is required. Courage is the capacity to confront discomfort, ambiguity, and personal inadequacy. It is the willingness to acknowledge betrayal, failure, and weakness without seeking refuge in denial. Consider the entrepreneur who defies the expectations of family and society to pursue a vision. Initial fear is overwhelming, but deliberate action begins to dismantle internalized control. Each choice aligned with authentic desire is a fracture in the invisible chains. Nietzsche's insight is that sovereignty over oneself is both a battle and a discipline. Liberation is not passive. It is earned through action, awareness, and endurance. The second stage of awakening involves reclaiming personal responsibility. The slave mind externalizes control, blaming circumstances, authority figures, or fate for limitations. Liberation requires acknowledging that, regardless of external conditions, responsibility for thought, action, and consequence rests within. The student who has been underperforming excuses failure on the teacher, the system, or lack of resources. The liberation of the mind occurs when excuses are abandoned and deliberate engagement replaces avoidance. Nietzsche emphasizes the transformative power of self-directed action. The individual who assumes responsibility begins to construct their life according to principle, not fear, and the internalized chains begin to weaken. Human flaws and deception complicate this path. The mind that has been enslaved is accustomed to comforting illusions. Truth, whether about oneself, others, or the world, is often unsettling. The acknowledgement of imperfection, betrayal, and moral ambiguity is painful. A loyal employee discovers systemic exploitation within their organization. A partner recognizes hidden selfishness or manipulation. A friend betrays trust. Each revelation challenges internalized narratives, producing emotional turbulence. The individual can either retreat into avoidance, reinforcing slavery, or confront the discomfort, integrating truth into understanding and decision-making. Nietzsche's philosophy suggests that endurance through this turbulence is the crucible of awakening. The mind that withstands discomfort without capitulation emerges stronger, wiser, and sovereign. Power dynamics operate within and without. Social hierarchies, authority, and influence shape behavior, yet the internalized chains of obedience amplify their effects. The person who avoids asserting opinion in professional or social contexts strengthens external control by reinforcing self-policing behavior. Recognition, influence, and autonomy are deferred to others, perpetuating subjugation. Liberation requires not only awareness, but deliberate action to reclaim influence over thought, speech, and choice. The individual who asserts control over their mental and emotional responses begins to undermine external domination, revealing that power begins within. The motivational dimension of this struggle cannot be understated. Every act of self-awareness, courage, and deliberate choice strengthens the psyche, reshaping patterns of fear and obedience. The musician who performs despite fear builds resilience. The writer who publishes despite criticism cultivates confidence. The professional who voices their perspective despite opposition exercises sovereignty. Each incremental act fractures the invisible prison, proving that liberation is cumulative, achievable, and empowering. Nietzsche's insight resonates. The most profound transformations occur not in the absence of challenge, but through engagement with adversity and conscious resistance to internalized control. Consider resilience as both armor and tool. The individual must endure uncertainty, emotional turbulence, and the consequences of autonomous action. Each challenge provides feedback, each setback offers insight, and each confrontation with fear reinforces inner authority. The mind that endures and integrates these lessons gradually transforms from obedient to self-governing, from reactive to proactive, from dependent to sovereign. The psychology of the slave mind is reversed not by external conquest, but through disciplined, intentional cultivation of mental strength, awareness, and ethical courage. The final stage of liberation is the embrace of purpose. Sovereignty over thought and action allows alignment with intrinsic values, desires, and vision. Life, once constrained by fear, expectation, and external influence, becomes an arena of deliberate creation. The individual who achieves this alignment experiences a psychological transformation. Clarity replaces confusion, confidence replaces hesitation, and action replaces avoidance. Nietzsche emphasizes that authentic power is inseparable from self-knowledge, discipline, and courage. The liberated mind, once enslaved, attains a level of influence, creativity, and fulfillment inaccessible to those still bound by internal chains. Every step of this journey, recognition, courage, responsibility, resilience, and purpose, requires confrontation with discomfort, reflection on personal weaknesses, and willingness to endure uncertainty. The enslaved mind thrives on avoidance. Liberation demands engagement. The process is neither simple nor comfortable. It is a long, deliberate, and often solitary endeavor, requiring vigilance against internalized control and persistent effort to maintain autonomy. Yet the rewards are profound. Clarity of purpose, depth of self-trust, and authentic engagement with life. The psychology of the slave mind reveals a fundamental truth: freedom is not external. It is not granted by authority, society, or circumstance. Freedom is a condition of thought, choice, and courage. Every act of awareness, every deliberate decision, and every confrontation with fear dismantles internalized control, revealing the potential inherent within the individual. Nietzsche's secret insight is that the chains that bind most deeply are self-imposed, and the keys lie within. Liberation begins with recognition, is forged in courage, and is maintained through deliberate engagement with reality. The enslaved mind can awaken, but awakening is neither gentle nor instantaneous. It demands persistence, reflection, and ethical engagement with oneself and the world. In conclusion, The human spirit has the capacity for profound transformation. The chains of the slave mind, fear, manipulation, obedience, and internalized limitation, can be shattered through awareness, courage, responsibility, resilience, and alignment with authentic purpose. Each individual carries the potential for sovereignty, yet few pursue it consciously, deterred by discomfort, fear, or habitual conformity. Nietzsche's hidden truth is unwavering. True freedom is achieved not by escaping external circumstance, but by conquering the internal mechanisms of subjugation. The individual who confronts the psychology of the slave mind gains mastery over thought, choice, and destiny. The cost is challenge, the reward is transcendence. Take responsibility for your fears, confront your internalized chains, and reclaim authority over your life. Each moment of courage, each deliberate decision, and each act of self-awareness is a fracture in the prison of the mind. The path is difficult, often isolating, yet it leads to the profound reward of authentic existence. The psychology of the slave mind need not be destiny. You have the capacity to awaken, to resist conformity, to endure discomfort, and to embrace freedom. The moment of choice is now. The chains are yours to break, and the life waiting beyond fear is yours to claim.